December 20th, 1943, over Bremen, Germany. The sky was a graveyard of burning steel. 1,000 feet below, the city burned like a furnace, pouring black columns of smoke that rose to meet the bombers still clawing their way home. Inside one of them, a B-17 flying fortress named Redemption Bell, the smell of fuel and fear hung thick in the frozen air. The mission had been chaos, flak bursts ripping open bellies of aircraft, tracer fire weaving red scars through the clouds. Sergeant Jack Turner sat cramped in the tail turret, surrounded by rattling metal and the constant vibration of the engines. 23 years old, a farm kid from Kansas, he had joined the Army Air Forces believing he'd fly just once before fate claimed him. This was his 7th mission. The odds had already turned against him. Above the endless gray, the sound of distant explosions faded into a hollow silence, broken only by the steady chug of 3 surviving engines. One was dead, its propeller frozen in place like a wooden cross against the clouds. Oxygen hissed through cracked masks. Hydraulic fluid seeped beneath his boots. Somewhere in the fuselage, someone was bleeding. Through the small glass dome of the turret, Turner scanned the pale sky. Contrails arched like ghostly ribs against the sun. His breath fogged the glass in rhythmic bursts. Training had taught him to trust the instruments, but instinct told him something else. Something was out there, stalking them beyond the veil of smoke. He wiped the frost away and saw them. 12 Bf-109s gliding down from the sun in perfect formation. Predators circling a dying beast. The Luftwaffe had found them. Turner's heart hammered in his chest. The intercom was dead, wires cut by shrapnel, and the crew up front had no idea what was about to descend upon them. He checked the twin .50 caliber Brownings, belts of ammunition curling around like serpents. He'd cleaned those guns that morning, whispering a small prayer over each round. Now they were his only language of survival. The first pair of Messerschmitts dove through the haze, cannons spitting fire. Their shells shredded what was left of Redemption Bell's tail fin, tearing metal like paper. Turner felt the whole aircraft shudder. He squeezed the triggers. 2 streams of fire roared out, meeting the first fighter head-on. It erupted in flame, a brief sunburst against the clouds. 1 kill, but 11 remained. As the smoke from the explosion rolled over him, Turner felt something deeper than fear, a strange calm. The kind that only comes when you've already accepted the end. His oxygen gauge trembled near empty. His fingers ached from the cold. The radio silence screamed louder than any siren. The second wave came in low, weaving between the contrails. They weren't rushing. They were playing. The Luftwaffe pilots knew a crippled bomber when they saw one. They'd circle it, tease it, then finish it near the coast, where no rescue would ever arrive. Turner understood that game. He'd seen it before. Through the narrow sight, he caught glimpses of enemy markings. Black crosses painted like signatures of death. The Bf-109s spread wide, closing in from all angles. Turner rotated his turret, but the gear ground to a halt halfway through its sweep. A shell had jammed the rotation mechanism. He was trapped in one position. The bomber's tail drifted helplessly. The controls were sluggish. Every second of silence was a countdown to impact. Turner's breath quickened. The men up front still didn't know. They were flying blind, wounded, and fading. Outside, the German formation broke apart like a pack of wolves. 2 peeled off left, 2 right, for straight down from above. The rest vanished into cloud cover, preparing for the kill. Turner's mind raced, not with fear but calculation. Every movement, every angle, every glint of sunlight mattered. Below him, the land was nothing but white. Snowfields, rivers frozen like veins of glass. He thought of home, of wheat fields and the Kansas wind. He thought of the letter in his jacket pocket, the one he'd written the night before but never sealed. "If I don't make it home," it began, "tell Mom I wasn't afraid." The engines roared, coughing. The aircraft dropped 100 feet, then steadied. Turner looked back at the sky. The 109s were closing fast. He could almost see their pilots' goggles glinting in the light. One of them dipped a wing, signaling the attack. But before the storm hit, the narrator's tone softens. Time seems to hold its breath. The screen of imagination freezes on Turner's face. Ice crystals on his lashes, smoke staining his flight jacket. The sound fades to a heartbeat. The world narrows to that small turret, the place where courage would soon defy reason. Before we dive deeper into this unbelievable true story, make sure you hit that subscribe button to join us here at WW2 Frontline Legends. Tell me where you're watching from around the world. I read every single comment and love seeing how far these forgotten war stories travel. If you're enjoying these hidden chapters of World War II courage, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves history as much as you do. Now back to the frozen sky over Germany, where a single tail gunner's suicidal decision would change the face of air combat forever. The heartbeat resumes. The 109s dive again. Tracers slice through the cloud, tearing across the fuselage. Turner's guns flare back, flashes of orange in the gray void. The bomber trembles under impact. One gun jams. He slaps it, clears the feed, fires again. Another fighter bursts into pieces, its wings spiraling away like a paper scrap. Still they come. He's surrounded, the sky alive with gunfire. He can taste metal in his mouth. He's running out of ammo. Every trigger squeeze feels heavier than the last. The turret jerks, stalls completely, the gears shot through. His guns lock halfway to starboard. The enemy lines up from below, unseen. Inside the plane, the world tilts. Turner feels the vibration change pitch, an engine coughing itself to death. The bell is dying. The next few minutes will decide not only his life, but 6 others depending on him. Above, another pair of Messerschmitts dives through the sun. The glare blinds him for an instant. He breathes in, slow and steady. His hand moves to the emergency lever on instinct. What he's about to attempt defies every rule of training, logic, and survival. The narrator's tone drops to a whisper. He didn't know it then, but the next 4 minutes would make him a legend, and leave the Luftwaffe questioning what they'd just witnessed in the skies over BR. Eamon. The sky had become a cage of fire. The crippled B-17 redemption bell groaned under its own weight, 3 engines coughing in uneven rhythm, 1 dead and smoking. Inside, every bolt and rivet shivered under the pounding of enemy guns. The bomber bled altitude, trailing smoke like a wounded animal staggering through snow. At the tail, Sergeant Jack Turner stared through the spider-webbed glass of his turret. The rotation gears had jammed solid, his guns locked halfway across the arc. He was pinned like a man in a coffin. The enemy was everywhere, tiny black specks dancing against the pale sky, glinting in the sunlight, closing fast. Through the vibrating glass, he could see them now. The German fighters of JG-26 Schlageter, the most feared Luftwaffe squadron over northern Germany. Their yellow-nosed Bf-109s moved like predators who had already chosen their kill. They didn't charge recklessly. They circled first, testing, measuring, waiting for the bomber to bleed out before finishing the job. Turner's oxygen was low. The needle hovered at the red line. The intercom still dead. Up front, the pilot wrestled a failing yoke. The navigator fought to keep course. But in the tail, Turner was alone, cut off from sound except for the engine's metallic scream. Then, through the snow of tracer rounds, a realization hit him. The fighters weren't attacking randomly. They were herding the bell, driving her toward the coast, the perfect place to strike and still make it home before nightfall. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a hunt. Turner glanced at the emergency cable beside his seat, a thick steel line meant for manual operation if hydraulics failed. But the manual crank was useless. The gears were mangled. He followed the cable with his eyes until it disappeared into the tail structure. Then a thought came to him, reckless, desperate, insane. He unbuckled. The motion alone was suicidal at that altitude. The turret hatch blew open. The slipstream howled in like an explosion of knives. Freezing air hit his face, turning his breath to crystals. He gripped the cable with his left hand, clutching a wrench in his right, a small tool he'd tied to his wrist with duct tape that morning, just in case. He'd never known what just in case would mean until now. With his body half outside the turret, he used his weight as leverage. The tail section swung, inch by inch, metal screaming under the strain. He aimed the frozen guns by sheer force of will, lining them toward the sun. The first German fighter came in high, banking to rake the bell's spine. Turner squeezed both triggers. The guns spat fire, the brass casings ejected into the wind like golden rain. The burst caught the 109 square in its belly. It vanished in a flash of orange. 1 kill. The recoil nearly threw him out of the turret. He clung to the cable, his body thrashing in the freezing gale. His face burned with frostbite, his vision blurring. But he kept firing. Another 109 appeared, nose guns flickering. He swung again, muscle against steel, and let loose another burst. The German veered, too slow. The rounds tore through its right wing. It rolled, caught fire, and spiraled downward, a comet falling through the clouds. Turner's entire body trembled, veins freezing, blood slowing. He was operating on instinct now, pure survival and duty. Inside the Bell, the crew felt each shockwave. They didn't know what was happening behind them, only that somehow, impossibly, the Luftwaffe was breaking formation. The next two fighters came in from opposite sides. Turner fired short, controlled bursts, tracers crisscrossing in midair. One pilot dove too late. His canopy erupted in smoke. The other tried to roll away, but collided with the wreckage of his comrade. Both disappeared into the gray. In less than 2 minutes, for planes had fallen. But the maneuver had a price. Turner's oxygen hose snapped free from its socket. Cold rushed into his lungs like knives. The world around him began to fade to white. His hearing narrowed until he could only make out the faint ticking of his watch. Somewhere in that fading world, new enemies approached. Through the haze, Turner saw 3 Bf-109s reforming, leaders of the remaining pack. Their formation was perfect, military precision born of years in the Luftwaffe. They came in synchronized, cannons blazing. Shells tore across the Bell's wings, fuel sprayed into open air. Fire licked across the fuselage. Turner barely registered the damage. His focus was absolute. He forced the turret again with the cable, his muscles tearing against the harness. He could feel the bones in his wrist grinding. But the guns swung just enough. He fired. 2 fighters broke away, trailing smoke. One dove into the cloud cover, never reappearing. The other flipped inverted, flames spewing from its engine before vanishing below the horizon. The last fighter pressed on, its guns hammering, tracer lines converging on Turner's turret. Bullets tore through the metal shell. One grazed his shoulder, spinning him sideways. Pain seared down his arm, but he didn't stop. He returned fire until the barrels glowed red. His final burst hit the 109's engine block, splitting it open like glass. The German pilot ejected too late. The aircraft burst apart in a white-orange bloom. Turner slumped forward. The world tilted again. He could taste blood. His gloves were stiff with ice, his breath ragged. The smell of cordite filled the air. But the nightmare wasn't over. Above, 3 more fighters circled, but something strange happened. They began firing at each other. One clipped another's wing. Sparks. Confusion. Over the intercom of a surviving bomber miles away, a crewman shouted that the German formation was breaking apart. No one knew why. The truth was chaos. Turner's erratic, swinging fire pattern had fooled the Luftwaffe into believing a new Allied squadron had joined the fight from behind. From their perspective, tracers came from impossible angles. They began attacking shadows, ghosts that weren't there. 2 collided mid-turn. A third spiraled out of control, crashing into debris. In 4 minutes, 12 Bf-109s were gone, some by Turner's bullets, others by friendly fire. The air fell silent again. Only smoke remained. The Redemption Bell staggered forward, her wings trembling, engines sputtering like a dying heartbeat. Inside, the crew sat in stunned disbelief. No one spoke. The tail gunner's position looked shattered, metal peeled open, glass gone, the turret blackened with soot. Then movement. Turner, still harnessed, half frozen, gripping the twin .50s like a lifeline. He wasn't dead. His eyes were open, glassy, fixed on the endless white below. Slowly, he crawled back inside. Every inch was agony. His oxygen mask dangled uselessly, his uniform stiff with frost. He collapsed beside the gun mount, consciousness slipping away. The last thing he heard was the dull hum of the surviving engines and the faint ticking of his watch, counting each second he had stolen from death. Outside, the German fighters were gone. The sky was empty, except for drifting smoke trails curling like ghosts over the North Sea. The Bell limped westward, losing altitude but still flying. The pilot, unaware of the miracle behind him, guided the crippled aircraft toward the English Channel. Far below, German civilians in Bremen looked up, watching a blackened B-17 dragging its shadow across the winter sky. They didn't know that inside that wreck, a man had just performed one of the most reckless acts in aviation history. As night approached, the bomber crossed the coastline. British radar stations picked up the signal. One friendly, barely alive, approaching from the east. Rescue crews prepared along the coast. In the tail, Turner drifted between life and death. He dreamed of wheat fields. He dreamed of the wind over Kansas. He dreamed of a letter he'd never mailed. The Redemption Bell touched down in England just before midnight. The landing gear collapsed. The bomber slid across the icy runway, sparks trailing from its belly. Fire crews rushed in, axes and hoses in hand. They pulled open the rear hatch and found Turner still gripping the frozen handles of his guns. His hands had fused to the metal. They had to cut the grips free to remove him. Medics rushed him to the infirmary. His skin was white with frostbite, his pulse weak but steady. He muttered only one sentence before slipping into unconsciousness. Did we make it? He did make it. But he had no idea that the real shock was still to come. Because while Turner lay in a hospital bed in England, German intelligence officers were writing reports, convinced they'd encountered a new secret Allied weapon. They called it der Rückenschutz automatic system, the automatic rear defense system. They believed it was a remote-controlled gun platform hidden in bomber tails, capable of tracking fighters independently. They never realized it wasn't a machine at all. It was one man, dangling half outside a frozen turret, driven only by instinct, faith, and the desperate will to keep his crew alive. December 21, 1943, RAF Bassingbourn, England. The fog hung low that morning, heavy with the smell of fuel and burnt oil. The wreck of Redemption Bell sat on the tarmac like a wounded giant, its fuselage torn open, metal curled and blackened by fire. The mechanics walked around it in silence, their boots echoing in the damp air. No one could understand how it was still in one piece. Medical trucks idled beside the hangar. Inside the infirmary, Sergeant Jack Turner lay under wool blankets, his face pale, his fingers bandaged to the wrists. His hands were ruined, skin fused to gunmetal, tendons torn from hours of gripping the twin .50s. Frostbite had eaten through the tips of 2 fingers. Yet his pulse was steady. His chest rose and fell slowly, as if refusing to give up the rhythm of life. Doctors called it a miracle. The crew called it something else, impossible. Word spread through the airfield like wildfire. Crews from neighboring squadrons came to see the bomber that had limped home through a sky of fire. The name Turner passed from mouth to mouth like a rumor too unbelievable to be true. Some said he shot down 6. Others swore it was 9. The number didn't matter. The truth was stranger than all of them. By noon, intelligence officers from the 8th Air Force arrived. They had intercepted German radio transmissions overnight. The Luftwaffe, still reeling from the Bremen raid, had filed a complaint up the chain of command, claiming the Americans had deployed a new weapon. They described seeing independent tail defenses that targeted multiple aircraft simultaneously. No one on the Allied side could explain it. When engineers examined Redemption Bell's tail section, they found the turret destroyed, gears fused, wiring melted. There was no automation, no secret weapon, no experimental device. Just a broken gun mount, a snapped oxygen line, and a blood-stained harness. Only then did the pieces begin to fit together. Turner's actions, his desperate swinging of the turret by hand, had created a pattern of fire so erratic that the Luftwaffe believed it was mechanical. His bursts had come from impossible angles, seemingly tracking multiple fighters at once. It was a miracle born not from technology, but from human instinct. The investigation confirmed the unimaginable. 12 German aircraft destroyed in 4 minutes, for directly by Turner's guns, the rest by mid-air collisions and friendly fire during the confusion. For days, officers debated how to report it. Some said the story was too unbelievable to record officially. Others feared it might inspire reckless heroics among gunners who tried to imitate him. So it stayed classified, filed under extraordinary action, and sealed away in mission archives. Turner recovered slowly. His body healed, but his hands never regained full strength. He would never fly combat again. Yet he never spoke of that day with pride. When asked by reporters after the war, he simply said, "I did what I had to do." He returned home to Kansas in 1946, to the same quiet fields he'd left behind. The war ended, the world moved on, and the name Jack Turner faded from headlines. But among the men who flew in the Redemption Bell, it became legend. They called him the man who fought the sky itself. But history, as it often does, took decades to catch up with him. In the 1960s, declassified reports from the German side finally revealed the confusion that Turner's maneuver had caused. One Luftwaffe commander wrote, "The enemy appears to possess a new automated rear weapon system. Multiple 109s were lost under sustained and unpredictable fire." It was the only documented case during the war where an entire Luftwaffe flight misidentified a single gunner's attack as an advanced Allied defense system. Ironically, just a few years later, Allied engineers would introduce servo-assisted tail turrets, technology eerily similar to what German pilots had imagined that day. Turner's suicidal method had unknowingly predicted the future of aerial defense. To some, it was divine irony. To others, proof that the line between desperation and innovation is razor-thin. In a small town in Kansas, Turner lived a quiet life. He never married. He worked at a local grain elevator, his hands too damaged for farming, but steady enough to fix machinery. Neighbors saw him as a kind, quiet man who attended church every Sunday and rarely spoke of the war. But in the evenings, when the wind blew across the wheat fields and the sun dipped low, locals said they sometimes saw him standing alone by the fence line, staring at the sky, watching contrails drift high above. No one knew what he was thinking, but perhaps somewhere in that vast silence, he was remembering the sound of those engines, the rattle of guns, and the moment he faced death with nothing but courage and steel. Years later, his old crew gathered for a reunion. Most had gray hair now, some walked with canes, but when they spoke of that mission, their voices carried the same awe as before. "He saved us all," one of them said. Another added quietly, "No one else could have done it." They toasted to him that night, not as a soldier, but as a friend who refused to die quietly. By the time official recognition came, Turner was gone. He passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1981. A small ceremony was held at the local cemetery. No military band, no reporters, just a folded flag and 7 old men who once flew through hell beside him. But history didn't forget. In 1993, 50 years after the Bremen mission, the U.S. Air Force formally acknowledged Sergeant Jack Turner's actions, citing exceptional courage under direct fire. His name was inscribed in the Airman's Hall of Valor at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. A faded photograph of Redemption Bell now hangs there. Tail section torn open, bullet holes like stars scattered across the metal. Below it, a small plaque reads, "Sergeant Jack Turner, Tail Gunner. Bremen Raid, 1943. Defied death. Redefined courage." Today, historians still debate how much of that mission was skill, and how much was something beyond human understanding. Some call it luck, others destiny. Perhaps both. What remains undeniable is this: one man, half frozen and alone, changed the way aerial combat was understood. His so-called suicidal maneuver wasn't madness. It was instinct elevated to art. In a war defined by machines, it was a reminder that the heart of victory still beats inside the human spirit. The camera of imagination drifts back to the sky over Bremen. The clouds part. The air is still. Smoke curls upward like the ghosts of lost aircraft. And somewhere, in that vast silence, the echo of gunfire fades into memory. The voice softens one last time. He didn't live to see peace celebrated in parades or medals pinned on uniforms. But his legacy flies in every aircraft that carries a defensive turret, every gunner who looks out at the endless sky and remembers that courage doesn't always look heroic, it sometimes looks suicidal. And yet, it's the reason others make it home. If stories like this remind you that courage still matters, please share this video, hit like, and subscribe to WW2 Frontline Legends for more untold tales of bravery. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from around the world, and let's keep these forgotten heroes alive together. I read every single comment, and your words help their memory fly just a little farther. Because some legends aren't written in books, they're written in smoke, fire, and the frozen skies of 1943.